Spacefair. Welcome to WTUFO. I'm Caleb Mayo. Hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to say a quick word about our mission and our business strategy. Business strategy is you guys, basically, and our mission is to open this conversation to as many people as possible. So because I want to do that as a public service, I don't have any paywalls. I don't have any content that you can't get unless you subscribe to our show. And the reason I do that is that I want everyone to be able to access this information for free, because I think this is an important emerging conversation that we're all going to have around the world, and we should have it as openly and as courageously and curiously as we possibly can. So I keep all my information and content public for that reason. And this is where you come in, because I don't make any money doing this. I do have a shop at spacefair.etsy.com, and you can go check that out and maybe consider buying some spacey or UFO-y merch. I don't have big sponsors on the show, but what I do have is a few supporters from the community. And if you are enjoying the show, I would really appreciate it if you could become one of those supporters. So what I'm looking for is just whatever's comfortable for you. I pitch like $1 a month. If $1 a month is not comfortable for you right now, please just continue enjoying for free. But if you're watching multiple episodes and $1 a month is comfortable for you, it would mean the world to me if you could sign up on patreon.com/WTUFO or use the YouTube membership or Buzzsprout membership features and just support the show for $1 a month. If you want it to keep existing, this would be a really good strategy to help ensure that it does. I still make this show every week, and I want to keep doing that as a volunteer service. I consider this sort of activism of a kind, intellectual and communicative cultural activism. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I want to share these conversations with the world. So your support enables me to continue doing that, and I'm extremely grateful. So if you are supporting the show, thank you so much. And if you haven't started yet, please sign up for $1 a month at patreon.com/WTUFO or YouTube's membership or Buzzsprout's membership. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for enjoying the show, and let's get into the episode. What the UFO? I'm here with Chad Wanless and Dave Palachik. Nice to meet you guys.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give a quick bio from the back of your book here. Chad Wanless is an engineering technologist with over 30 years of experience in mechanical design, specialized in optics and lighting technologies. His expertise allowed him to recognize subtle anomalies indicating gravitational lensing in UAP footage. We're going to dig into that, and it's very exciting. As a subject here, that'll be our primary focus. Second bio, Professor Dave Palachik is a senior electrical and electronic engineering technologist, National Director Emeritus of MUFON Canada, and an expert in infrared and electronic security systems. And we're here primarily to talk about your book, Hidden in Plain Sight: Evidence of Exotic UFO Propulsion. Does this all sound right to you guys?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, as our way in, I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about your careers in technology and what got you interested in UFOs.
Dave, you start.
Well, I started my career as an IBM computer engineer, continued on in that, ended up being the president of my own company as an IBM business partner after I left IBM after about 10 years, more than 10 years, and continued on that. And during that period, I was invited to start teaching at a local college and ended up getting my professorship and continued there since 2004. Now, I have not taught in the last couple of years and kind of taking a sabbatical or a hiatus from it while I'm pursuing other options. So what got me started in this was basically as a child, I knew something was different. I'd seen things in the sky that I couldn't account for. I'm one of those guys that I try everything at least once. And it was about 15 years ago, I think now 14 to 15 years ago, I decided to join a group instead of trying to do investigations on my own. And that was MUFON Canada. And my career with the MUFON Canada went from being a field investigator up to the national chief investigator, the training person does all the training, like I got to train Chad, and then eventually in 2000 became the national director. I stepped down after 4 years after winning the best international chapter in the world award from MUFON. And
Nice.
I stepped down to do other things, which is really pursue a different investigative career. And if we get into it, with a group called CISA, which is the Center for the Scientific Study of Atmospheric Anomalies. Chad.
Okay. Well, I started out my career working for a lighting company. in British Columbia. I did that for the first 5 years. That's where I learned the physics of lighting. Had to take the company had me take some engineering courses on lighting. I was the photometry lab technician testing lights. I even got to test the very first holographic lens, which was really fascinating. And then from there, I moved on into consulting engineering, doing mostly industrial type engineering since then. What got me started or interested was I'm an experiencer. I'd seen something when I was 6 years old. It was an orange Saturn shaped disc hovering in the sky, and I thought, wow, it's Saturn in the sky. And then I went to another room and looked out again. This time it was floating in front of the ocean. I thought, oh, I might be seeing Saturn's reflection off the water. Laid down. I thought, one more time. I want one more look. I looked. This time it was floating in front of the mountain on the other side of the inlet. And now I'm thinking, how am I seeing Saturn through the mountain? And then I had a couple other sightings. Another one when I was 18. And but really my world came crashing down when I was 19, 20 years old, and I realized I was an experiencer, and there was a lot more to these sightings than I had realized. And so what brought me to MUFON was about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to go to the MUFON symposium conferences, and I got to meet many of the people who are running the experiencer resource team, Kathleen Martin, George Medic, Denise Stoner, and got to know them. There was an experiencer workshop that I participated in, really enjoyed it, really got a lot out of it. Next year, I went back, and Kathleen's like, you got to join MUFON. We need more people like you. So I looked into it, and I did, and that's how I met Dave. He was the person who trained me. Went over reports, evaluated them, discovered that Saskatchewan, actually, where I live, is a hotspot for giant triangles, which it's little known because most triangles have hundreds of witnesses in a single event. Because of the low population density here, it's a larger number of triangular sightings seen by small numbers of people. Mm-hmm. So that was quite fascinating, including someone in my own family had seen one. So from there, I got into the ERT and was doing that for several years. And then one day, I was watching a podcast, The Angry Astronaut, and he had a slow motion video of a Saturn-shaped craft flying over, I believe it was Colombia, captured from an airliner, a commercial airliner. And I thought, okay, there's the thing that I saw, but then it was playing in slow motion, and I realized the background clouds were moving as it was passing in front. And I phoned up Dave. I'm like, Dave, you got to look at this. This looks like gravitational lensing to me. And we both knew what that is. It's an astronomical term we'll be going over shortly. And he gets back and he says, yeah, that is gravitational lensing. Dave, what was your opinion of that video?
That was an aha moment because it was the first time anybody had really slowed down a UAP video. And Chad saw it. And when he pointed it out, it was like, yeah, we're both astrophysicists, sort of type-minded scientists, and that's why we do some weird things. So it was like, we got to write up this, we got to investigate this further in a different format. We couldn't open up a MUFON case. So yeah, so just to finish a couple more things that Chad's alluding to, when I was in charge of MUFON Canada as a national director, actually even before that as a national chief investigator, I asked Chad to take over as our experiencer research manager. So the cases he got to work on were with other experiencers, because he had an ability to talk to these people, being an experiencer himself. So that's when he refers to being on ERT, the Experiencer Research or Resource Team. So he did that for a number of years, and it was fantastic, and we just continued to work together. But that UAP over out of the airline window, that was the aha moment, and we just continued from that point on.
Yeah. So
Wow.
from there,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say from there, I contacted the MUFON Journal and said, I found this thing. I want to write something up. And they said, yeah, go ahead. So I proceeded, wrote a good long document up. It was published in 2 parts. Due to the space size limitations, part 1 was in July of last year. And it basically said and described what is gravitational lensing and what could it look like if a UAP was causing gravitational lensing. And the second part, published in August, was actually an entire evaluation of the Aguadilla UAP video and how I was spotting gravitational lensing as it was passing in front of different background objects.
Yeah. And when Chad published that, before he sent it all to me. That's why we're working on these together. And it was like, oh my God, you've gone into this so deeply. This is amazing. This is like a scientific paper. And we're going to let Chad talk about that in a little later. But it was like, yeah, if they want to publish it, get it down to them. We're going to open some eyes, and maybe some scientists are going to read this and going to say, yeah, we've thought of this. We've, it's time somebody put it out to the public, and that's what we've done.
So it has been, gravitational lensing has been identified with the Aguadilla UAP by other researchers. Kenneth Knuth?
Kevin Knuth?
Yep. He was the first one I found who wrote about it in 2021. It took up 1 or 2 pages in one of his presentations. And there's another website that's dedicated to it that I found recently before I published the book. So it's linked in there where they went over it in quite a bit of a detail. But neither one of them described or went into details of why the light would be bending and what could cause it. So that's where I took it a lot further.
Wow, this sounds like a really productive avenue of scientific inquiry. Good job, Chad, and congrats, Dave. Thank you guys so much for reaching out and being ready to share. I'm ready to learn. I just want to flag before we leave it that leading MUFON in a nation is a pretty big deal, and it must have been pretty fun. What kind of scope of operation were you guys looking at? Were you part of like a team of dozens or like hundreds of people? Like how many researchers?
It would be nice to have hundreds. So when I took over MUFON, we had about 30 on the team. Only half those being certified field investigators. And quite a course you have to go through and have a passing of 80% or higher. I had the fun of enhancing that team to about 60 some odd people, including some hypnotherapists, some researchers, a special program that we're assisting the U.S. headquarters called the Mars project. And it was
an acronym.
Yeah, I can't actually remember with it. It's so long ago now, but it was basically take the old paper cases, digitize them, and verify them, and then redact any names and addresses. Like, yes, we do redact personal information. We do not let out to the public. This is MUFON talking. So it was, I work 40 hours a week like most people. It was another 40 hours a week running MUFON for, well, probably 7 or 8 years. Forward officially as the top dog, if you want to say the national director, but as a national investigator for all of Canada, I really helped our national director, which was Stu Bundy at the time, great guy. And it was another job full time. It was amazing. And actually, one of the reasons I did step down, not only to pursue other interests and a business interest that Chad and I are also involved in, which is nothing to do with UAPs, but I actually became very ill. And it took 2 years for the hospital to find out why I almost died. And I had a big operation, and took a long time to recover from not only out of the operation, but coming out of the operation onto the recovery table. They weren't too sure I was going to make it. But anyways, I feel great now. So another year, and it's only been less than a year since I had that operation, but we found the problem. So,
wow. I'm glad you're okay. I'm sorry you went through that.
Well, I'm getting back. Thank you very much. But getting back into this, that's why I'm so adamant to work with Chad and our other group that we've put together, which Chad is now part of. If we have time to talk about it, we will. We'll put a little plug in it because it's very important. You might want to interview that group. But anyways, yeah, Chad, it's been a great 10 years of a friendship and business, because like I said, we have another business, which is a software company. So,
and you guys are in different cities, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm out in the east side of Toronto, and Chad's in Saskatoon.
It's middle of the country.
Yeah, middle of the country. I've not been there. I've been to Alberta, but not to Saskatoon. I haven't gone to Saskatchewan yet. That's my next trip. So
interesting. And before we leave your bios too far, did you both get undergrad degrees in engineering technology, or did you go on to master's or doctorate research of any kind?
Well, I'll answer that first. I'm a professor without a title at the end of my name, like letters and stuff, like PhD and stuff. I never pursued it. My course that I took to get my engineering technology, senior electrical and electronic engineering technology, was a 4-year college course that was a degree equivalent to a full bachelor's. And I took the extra part, which would get me a master's. But in Ontario, the education ministry disallowed those after about 5 years. So I lost that. Those titles. I don't have them anymore. So I have an associate.
But functionally, we're talking about a master's worth of education in electrical engineering. Does
Absolutely, yeah. And Chad, what he's done, what he does, I know what he does, and he doesn't have to talk about it. He's the same. I'm going to boldly say that he has a master's engineering knowledge, and
Well, in my case, I took mechanical drafting. Nowadays, it's called mechanical engineering technologist, but 30 years ago it was called drafting. And then I also took extra courses for lighting physics, 3D modeling. I took one of the first 3ds Max courses that the Institute BCIT took. I also took some courses at Emily Carr Art and Design University before I went to BCIT. But I've been working as a designer, and I've worked my way up to layout lead. In layman's terms, that's basically I'm the chief architect for industrial facilities. So
interesting, cool. I always like knowing what else is going on in all our lives, because so many of us in the UFO community have a different aspect to our existence outside of this research.
Chad and I both have the same attitude that you learn something new every day. So I have taken countless courses every year. And I turned 70 in May of this year. So
nice.
I'm still working full time and still taking courses, and I'm still teaching.
Cool. What do you teach?
Well, at the college, which I said I haven't taught in the last couple of years, I teach electronics, electrical, electricity, electronics, digital electronics, computer sciences, office products. It's the whole gamut of information technology and electronic engineering. And in my daytime course, I teach a lot of things, project management. And on top of that, I teach how technicians can improve themselves in the electronic security industry. So I teach the new techs when they come in. I even put them through a basic electronic course and electrical course so they understand it, because a lot of them come in as mechanical techs. So I'm teaching constantly, and I got a couple more courses. I'm learning right now. I'm taking courses online right now to learn how to better program Raspberry Pis. Consider I have 12 of them here running, and I just barely got them going. I want to learn more.
Nice. So it sounds fair to say that you guys have expertise in like electrical components, the engineering aspect of this, and probably some expertise in some of the software too, especially probably Chad in the imagerial department. So maybe, Chad, would you like to lead us into talking about the book a little more explicitly?
I'll give you one more little hint, little comment, because I admire what Chad has done. He just has an eye for things that most people don't. His observation skills are unbelievable. I have that same because I did search and rescue, a volunteer search and rescue. And one more little thing, if you really want to know a little bit more about Professor Dave, I took nuclear engineering at university. Okay, so I don't have a degree in it, but boy, did it teach me a lot of things. So
Fascinating. Cool. Well, I come to this from classical acting, so my skills are talking and pivoting. But I will ask the best possible questions that I can think of, and smile and nod politely when I can't, as we get into some of this science stuff.
Okay, perfect. Well, the last thing before I start the screen share in my presentation is, as a designer who is constantly checking not only my own drawings, but the drawings and the models that are created by the people who work underneath me, I am constantly scanning and looking for things that are wrong. It could be, is something out of place? Is it something in the wrong spot? Is there a safety issue, a design issue? If something goes wrong, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix something in the field, or worse. And so I've learned over the last 30 years, it's a skill that I learned to basically be a skilled observationist, trained observation to look for something. I remember one time my boss showed me a set of drawings. He was really proud. I did these myself, and I looked at it, and something was wrong with one of these drawings. I'm looking and looking, and I finally found it. His elevation was off. And he's like, "Oh, wow, perfect. Checked by Chad. We're good to go."
Nice. That's good background, because it leads us into these kinds of observations that you might have been especially well suited to make.
Exactly. Okay, I will share my screen. This is the two books I have. On the right-hand side is Hidden in Plain Sight, the book that we just published. On the left-hand side is Missing Time 2, my personal memoir. It's going to be available. We're aiming for summertime.
Cool. So that would be summertime 2025.
Yep.
And people can pick up Hidden in Plain Sight right now on Amazon. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Cool.
It's on available as a hardcover, paperback, and e-reader.
Nice. Was this your first self-publishing venture?
This is actually.
You did.
I did take a look, tried to find someone to cover it for me, be a representative, but in the end, everyone recommended self-publishing for the UFO topic.
Makes sense in our new world.
Yeah.
Just quickly on that front image, the image on the cover of your book is from a file, right? That's I want to say a 1950s UFO picture. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was going to say, one of the images on your background is the 1950 Trent photograph.
Okay. Yeah. I've got McMinnville behind me for people who are listening.
Yeah, and I will be going over that in detail about 3/4 of the way through. But yes,
nice.
It is considered the first UFO photograph taken shortly after the Kenneth Arnold sighting in 1947. Paul Trent was the photographer. This is his photo, and I've applied a spatial deformation scatter plot on it. All right, so to start out with, I wanted to show how light was traveling through the spatial warp around a UAP for my original MUFON journal article. So I had to look up the Alcubierre shape function and learn how it worked. So what you see here is what is called a scatter plot. I basically took a large number of points and applied the Alcubierre shape function to it. So left-hand side, you can see the formula as written by Dr. Alcubierre. On the right-hand side, what that formula does is it basically says you take any point in space, you apply this formula to it, and it'll tell you how much it gets pulled towards the center of the warp drive or pushed away from the center of the warp drive, causing a contraction above or in front and an expansion below or behind the warp drive.
Okay, now, just a flag for people who are listening in podcast format. You can watch this on YouTube if you want at YouTube/@WhatTheUFO, or just look for us with WTUFO on YouTube. Or you can pick up this book again from Amazon. Chad's going to describe a bunch of visual images here, so follow along if you can by listening. We'll try to give visual descriptions, but if you want to actually see them, you can watch this on YouTube.
Yeah, so we don't lose the listeners of this podcast or the viewers. We were talking about gravitational lensing and how we've noticed things warping or changing around the UAPs. what we're suggesting is they are using some sort of warp drive, and the Alcubierre warp drive that the doctor came up with long before people were even looking at or having videos of this fit the actual model. So we've jumped in. I know Chad just jumped into saying warp drive, but this is what this is all about. We're going to prove that these UAPs have some sort of warp drive equivalent and why we see what we see in the video. So go ahead, Chad.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so basically what it is there's a scattering of dots or points above the warp drive in this case, and it's pulling all the points in towards itself. And then below that is a number of dots that are being pushed away. Now, when you look at this, there's two downward pointing arrows I've superimposed to show that there's this kind of a V shape where in both the upper hemisphere and the lower hemisphere where it's pointing downwards. Now, for the warp drive to work, there needs to be an upward pointing. I'll explain it in a second here, but basically, if you look across the middle, you can see there's a disconnect between the center between the upper set of points and the lower set of points. And there's something wrong with this. Space is elastic, but this next graph, I need to explain how gravity works before we can move on to why the Alcubierre shape function does what it does.
I want to just hop in with one layman's point/question here, which is that when we talk about warping, we're talking about warping space itself, right? So not just pushing objects in space away or toward something else, but distorting the whole space-time field itself. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Okay. So we're used to hearing warp as a speed past light. It's really what it is. It's a spatial warp of space itself.
Like a bending.
Yes, like a bending.
Space and time. And yes, we're used to Star Trek and Star Wars, and warp is speed. Warp 1 is equivalent speed of light. These aren't flying through our atmosphere at light speed. We'd never see them, but they are using the same principles as a warp drive. Now, it'd be great if Star Trek would turn around and say, the impulse engines are still warp drive, but anyways, that's of Hollywood. But yes, that's what we're used to. So, So Chad's going to explain gravity, which is a very important part of our discovery.
Great. It goes down, right? That's what I know about gravity.
Yeah.
Things fall. I think Newton proved that, didn't he, with the apple?
Yeah. Okay. So I heard this example a long time ago, and it's the best example I ever heard of what describes gravity. So imagine taking a block of wood, drilling 2 holes through it, and then thread some string through it and tie it to a doorknob. And then stand on the other side of it and pull the string apart. And you're going to see how that block of wood is going to move away from you and towards and eventually touch the doorknob. So this is a layman's example of what gravity does. Earth and other large masses it pulls space in towards itself, creating this V shape in the spatial fabric. And it's creating a lever effect that applies simultaneously to every molecule in your body, making them all fall down towards the earth at the same speed. So it's this pull of the string pulling it apart and the block of wood moving away from you. That is how gravity works. It is this lever effect on the spatial fabric. And this is the chief understanding that someone needs to know to understand how the spatial warp system works. So this next one, if you see here, image number 3 on the right shows the points are more smoothly bending towards each other. So it took me about 3 different tries, but I was able to find an elastic formula, and I applied it to Alcubierre's shape function to allow the space to bend back from underneath towards the compressed space above. Now, I've placed in my math on the left-hand side for those who are interested. I won't go through that. What's important here is if you look carefully at the dots, it's creating a wine decanter shape. So you can imagine a wine bottle. It splays out on the bottom, grows wide, and then comes back in where the neck narrows up, and then it splays back out where you pour the wine out. So the way this works is you can see 3 arrows in here. Below and above are 2 downward pointing arrows, because the space is creating a V that points downwards. And in the middle is an upward pointing arrow. There's a very narrow round section where when you activate this warp drive, anything that's inside that little narrow section will fall upwards. And in this case, it would fall up away from the Earth. Now, it's really important to point out here, it is absolutely no accident that narrow round space, if you're trying to build a vehicle that has the maximum number of efficiency for cargo space, engineering space, and personnel space, you have no choice but to build a disc-shaped craft using a single warp drive, single warp bubble.
And why is that? What would it do to another shape? Would it
if you had an extrusion sticking above or below, you would have a structural failure, because the gravity above would actually push the object into the top of the craft. And if there was an extrusion below it, it would pull it off and rip it off. So you have no choice to make a disc-shaped craft. Now, if you could make a round shape, if you were making a remote-controlled probe, the best to make it round. It doesn't need to be disc-shaped. If you were using 3 or more or 2 warp drives, you would make a cylinder, your tic-tac design. If you were using 3, it would be a triangle. And if you used more of these warp bubbles, then it could be a large boomerang, a larger triangle, or a very large cylinder. So,
what about an octagon?
An octagon would be basically a disc that's 8-sided instead of round.
Okay.
Yeah, like an orb is round. So,
yeah.
And by the way, the math fits all these shapes when you add more and more warp drives. The math proves the theory.
Are there shapes that don't fit? Like, could you just not do this with a square or a rectangle, or does everything could you build a version that would work for even, say, like a giant cube?
Everything needs to fit inside this warp bubble. So if you used a cube, it would fit, but it wouldn't be maximized for the usable space. Let's put it that way. So if you're remote controlling something, you can make it cubed. You can make it any shape you want, as long as it's roughly round or roughly disc shaped.
Why the difference in remote control?
Because it doesn't have to have storage space. If you're actually flying an object that has occupants in it, a pilot, scientists, biologists, stuff like that, you need space for them. Just like an airplane has a long cylindrical section, commercial airplane, to store people during transport, the equivalent would be a disc-shaped vehicle to put as many people inside as possible.
Okay. And I'm sure you could see why I would ask that, because we've seen a lot of metal orbs reported. As you say, that could be remote control. There's also been some reporting of cube-shaped objects. Like there was a famous one at, I believe, the Vandenberg Air Force Base that Ryan Graves mentioned to Congress. So that sounds to you like it might have been remotely controlled. But in terms of occupancy, objects like a Tic Tac or a saucer, or it sounded like maybe a cigar shape or a cylinder would accommodate occupancy by your theory. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Even the saucer shape, I wouldn't want to stand at the very edge of the saucer when it did an incredible, unbelievable turn at 50,000 Gs. You might end up being splattered on the wall, but in the center where you're protected, which is why we're talking about it being, UFO saucer shape, because that's, as Chad Kidd's already told you, that's the cargo space. Okay, the other thing is, think about the jellyfish. The jellyfish has a lot of tentacles hanging down. That's within the warp bubble, though.
Yep.
So that is an oddball shape, but it still fits the pattern and the mathematics. So let's look at what we found, and this is the unbelievable part about the warping of backgrounds.
Okay. All right. So the next thing I did was I created this simple diagram. At the center is a small object. It's a UAP. You can see I've used orange curves to represent the spatial curve. So above, you can see space-time has contracted, and below, you can see it's expanded. And so those curves act like any other lens would act. So as the light, shown as dark dashed blue, as it passes through that warped space, it gets bent. And in this case, a vantage point being a camera in the upper right corner, that light in both the upper and lower part, just above and below the UAP, will bend upwards towards the camera. Now, from the camera's point of view, image 5 here shows the UAP, and it shows the background roof of that building being bent down both above and below the craft. Now, it could be a small remote control UAP or something much larger, but what I found reviewing things was the small remote controls have a better detection of spatial deformations, which is what you see. On the right, image number 6, this is a simulation of a black hole as it passes in front of a galaxy. And you can see how the galaxy is warped and bent momentarily as it's passing in front.
And that's because the light is getting bent around the black hole. So we're perceiving it as if the galaxy was bending. Is that right?
And
exactly.
Yeah. And Einstein's theory, this is Einstein rings. And scientists all around the world, astrophysicists, have all certified that this is what exactly happens.
Matter of fact, Einstein's theory of relativity was proven using gravitational lensing in a photo in 1919 of a solar eclipse. And they took a photo and realized and saw that some of the stars that were there were shown farther away from the sun than they should have been.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you. Also, just want to say great job on your graphics here. It shows that you have professional skills in this department. They're really very clear. And just, you said this, but I'll just describe for listeners one more time that if you were to look at a UAP with a gravitational field around it, you might see the objects behind it dip down both above and below the UAP, creating a little curved effect.
Perfect, thanks. So next image. This is a set of still images taken from the Aguadilla UAP video. Row 7 indicates this is the original videos as taken from a FOIA released video. And row 8 is a computer enhanced video from the original leaked videos. Okay. Now, you can see as it's passing in front of what is actually a tarmac line on a tarmac, the airport tarmac. You can see the lines on the left-hand side and in the center being bent and twisted. And then top center, you can see the line actually disappears momentarily. And then left row number 8, you can see the lines disappeared momentarily. And on the right, you can barely see it, but the line is just beginning to bend. So the object is actually traveling from right to left in this series of still images. Row 9 in the bottom is a diagram showing, again, the orange decanter-shaped curve as around the UAP. And as it moves, you can see the light bending in dark blue, showing the path the light would have taken in all 3 of those positions.
Did you mean left to right when you said the object is moving?
No,
black object there is moving from the right to the left?
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I'm looking at the frames in the wrong order.
Look at the slides and start at the far right-hand side, moving towards the number, like number 7.
Got it.
Yeah. Direction that the UAP was traveling in the video.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so in this case, I centered it on the UAP, and then all the background objects are moving from the number 7 towards the red dot in the top right. So, but it was actually traveling from right to left. It all depends on which is you keep it still on.
Okay, but the main point here is that we're looking at some bending around the object.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, this next image, it's 3 stills. This is when the UAP was traveling in front of a building. The left-hand image, closest to the 10, this is stills from the FOIA released image. The middle one is contrast enhanced, so you can see it a bit better. And the right hand is the computer enhanced image. And in both videos, you can clearly see the roof line is changing underneath the UAP as it passes in front of it.
So I just have to ask layman question again. What is the enhancement doing? Like, why is the enhancement making the curves so much clearer?
I'm not 100% certain why. It was I guess it was amplifying the subtleties that was being noticed within the video.
It's only a contrast enhancement with slight filtering. We are not changing the picture itself. We're just pointing out by using some filtering, especially contrast enhancements, so you can see the line better.
So you're just increasing the contrast of the image?
That's the simplest way to put it, but we are not changing the photo itself. It's like if you just take any picture and turn the screen up on that you're watching it, and then suddenly it becomes very white or very, So we're just changing what you're seeing. We're not manipulating or doing any CGI whatsoever here. So the minute, I'm a photographer, and the minute you fire up the contrast a little higher with simple little just adjustments, you're not changing the original photo. You're just bringing to attention things that you want to see.
Yeah,
it looks denoised a little bit too. It's smoother.
The one on the right, the computer enhanced one, does denoise it a bit. Yeah, that's a filter too.
Okay. For people listening, it does get like remarkably more clear that the curves are happening around this object as you increase the contrast and reduce the noise. It's pretty striking. Want to head on to whatever's next?
Sure. All right. So there has been a lot of argument on this UAP. Is it a balloon? Is it a sky lantern?
Arrow. Sorry.
Yeah. So, most people don't have any idea that a balloon looks different to an IR camera than it does to visible light. Image 13 shows, circled in red, a latex balloon. Circled in blue is a mylar balloon. Image 14, bottom left, circled in red. You can barely see the balloon there because latex balloons are almost perfectly transparent to IR cameras. Mylar balloons, circled in blue, are actually perfect mirrors. Image 15 shows, instead of color contrast, black and white of it. Again, circled in red, you can barely tell the latex balloon is there, and on circled in blue, you can see this perfect oval-shaped mirror, which happens to be the Mylar balloon.
Keeping in mind that both images are infrared, one's a color, one's a black and white, and looking at it from a different angle. This is my specialty in electronic security that I do. I specialize in infrared cameras and the technology. And we went after this because Arrow reported the Aquadilla to be balloons. And in our book, we basically, I'm not saying dissed them, but proved them wrong.
Yeah.
Did they say what material they thought the balloons were?
The quote was, it was either a balloon or a sky lantern.
Yeah.
What's a sky lantern? Like where you put like a candle in a lantern and it flies into the air?
They used to be called Chinese balloons, Caleb.
Yep.
They're Chinese lanterns.
Right.
We don't use that term anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a hot air balloon that's about the size of a beach ball, made of paper with a candle in the center at the bottom.
Good description.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the only video I could find of a sky lantern taken using an IR camera. Dave Palachik was the IR specialist who took this video. He's taken a number of videos over a couple of years trying to prove the Aguadilla and the jellyfish are not balloons. But this one was the only one of a sky lantern. And you can see it's a dark blob with a bit of a haze around it. And he's tied it down to in front of his car. And you can see that it's this large black object, which kind of sort of somewhat looks like the Agua Della video, with one big exception.
And the sky lantern, in this case, it's basically black because it's representing hot black, because an infrared camera, if it's only infrared, doesn't detect the actual heat, but a thermal camera that's IR will tell you what the temperature of that black blob is. So definitely it's seeing heat. Now you can flip this around to be white hot, but that's not the standard IR image. And now Chad's going to show you some filtering effects on this slide, so you can see our next incredible discovery.
Yeah,
great.
So let's wanted to point out something here. As the UAP passes in front of darker background objects, every single time within the Agua Della video, there's this white cloud that forms, or that's visible above, left, center, or right of the UAP. You may have noticed it previously. It kind of looked like that flare that was on the black hole simulation, but it's something else. And so this IR camera is clearly showing something cold forming above the UAP. And I kept the sky lantern on the left to show there's no equivalent white object above the sky lantern. Those little hot air balloons are not capable of producing a very cold spot above it.
So that cloud is a temperature variance, and it's registered as cold here.
Yep.
Okay.
So then I took these still images, I put it through another filter, and I changed white to blue and black to red, simply to highlight the color variation, to emphasize that white object is something very cold, and that black object is something very hot.
Interesting. Okay, great. And again, much more curvy and much more clear in your high contrast version.
Yeah, and here I've blown it up so we can see it at more extent, and you can see that this white object, is moving from frame to frame. Image 20 on the left, you can see it's changed, and those are literally 3 consecutive frames.
Okay.
And then same with the right. Now, what is this cold object forming above it? It is a vapor cone. So image 23 on the left, basically what's going on is above the UAP, as it's traveling, it expands the space below it to counter Earth's gravity, so that the contraction is going to be above and just slightly left of the center of the UAP. That spatial contraction is compressing space. So think of it this way. Think of 1 cubic feet of air is where the blue arrow is on the left. And then as the UAP passes through it, that UAP suddenly finds itself in a compressed space of what is equivalent to 10 cubic feet of space instead of 1. So that space is relative to what it was before, and now it's finding itself in a volume 10 times larger. When air is suddenly and violently expanded like that, if there is moisture in the air, that moisture will instantly cool, and it'll instantly form a fog. That is called a vapor cone. On the right-hand side, image 24, you can see a standard photograph of an F-18 passing through the speed of Mach and creating a cone on the right-hand tailing half of the craft, of the aircraft. In this case, the UAP is the forming of the vapor is above the craft.
So this is an observable effect on fast jets.
Yeah, this is an observable effect on jets. As they pass through 0.8 to 1.2 of Mach, this cone forms. It's a shock wave where the air is decompressing and it's forming this vapor cone. In the case of the UAP, the compression of space above the object is causing the air to expand rapidly, creating another form of the same physical effect, a vapor cone, but it's above the craft instead of on the back half of it. Now, this was independently discovered and released recently by the Skywatchers team. their video part 2, which came out last week, they described, and the quote is here, there appears to be some kind of cloud or vapor around it. So they've been noticing a vapor cloud above or around the UAPs that they've been videoing in daylight.
And this is video, not infrared, right?
Correct. It's just visible light video.
Okay.
Now, there was one other video I found online. It was a video of a very large disc approaching a commercial aircraft. I found it on TikTok. There was no indication of where it was filmed, but this disc is traveling towards the airplane, and it's kind of doing this zigzag back and forth slightly. And then at the very last, it takes off an incredible rate of speed, and it takes off horizontally. These are the last still frames of the craft in the video. Image 27 shows it just before it departs. Video is frame number 28 is when it's departing at almost a 45-degree angle up into the video, and then 29 is as it disappears in the last frame underneath, just before it disappears underneath the airplane's wing, and it's traveling at incredible speed, an incredible distance. And the thing that I pointed out here, and which I found very interesting, was you can see above center there's this white formation in both image 28 and 29, and that white formation is not there in the full frame of image 27. That white object is forming in front of the craft as it's leaving.
Interesting. Which, by the way, if somebody was hoaxing this, it just seems like something they might not think to add.
That's a point I was going to get to. So this next one was when I did the spatial compression, I did another version of that scatter plot. I color-coded it based on the actual compression or expansion. So you can see here in magenta, just above the disk, you can see the point of the largest concentration of spatial compression. And in this particular example, it's about 1% of normal space, which means the space inside is probably 100% larger. I can't remember the reverse. It's probably 1,000 times larger than normal. But what's important here, image 30 and air 31, that cloud in 31 is an exact one-to-one correlation to the magenta spatial compression in image 30 on the left.
Interesting. And does this have to do with temperature, or this is more of like a pressure thing, or like a warping? What's your hypothesis about why it would be white above the craft?
What's going on here? This craft is actually departing horizontally. It's not actually moving up because the shape didn't change as it was going across the screen. If it was vertically going up, it would have become more flat, but it stayed the same oval shape as it departed horizontally. And so that white cloud you see in front of it, that is where the air molecules inside the air has suddenly found itself in a point of space drastically larger than it was just 1/30th of a second ago. So it's undergoing incredibly fast expansion. And all the vapor molecules in the air suddenly become very cold and become very visible, creating a cloud. And this goes to what you were getting at about this. If this was faked, this image, that cloud in front of it, that's not a lens flare. You can see the reflections of the sun off the disk on the left and the right-hand side of the disk. That is in front of it, and it's not even touching it. So my question, one of the reviewers put it this way. The simplest argument is this person didn't know that they needed to fake this. So the simplest explanation is this had to be an actual disk using actual Alcubierre warp drive as its main propulsion system.
Can I ask another stupid question? Why wouldn't the vapor get hotter as it expanded as opposed to colder? Don't we usually think about like water when it becomes more gaseous becoming hotter?
Before you even think about the expansion, Chad.
Yep.
When you turn a fan on, the air is moving quickly. Is it hot or cold?
Cold.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. And then the condensation is what Chad's been talking about. It suddenly vaporizes and becomes a cloud.
Yeah. It's called adiabatic expansion.
Okay, great.
It's how air conditioners work. After working for the lighting company, I worked in HVAC, commercial HVAC for a while, designing HVAC for buildings. Basically, what you do there is you compress some air down, in this case, Freon, and then it goes through a nozzle and expands on the other side. That expansion rapidly cools it off, and then you're blowing your hot air across that expanded area with the fins that the cold will come through, and that's how you cool off air in the air conditioning. So think of this as a giant air conditioner in front of the craft as it's traveling.
Cool. Wow, this is so interesting. And I've never seen this video. It looks kind of like a flying Roomba.
Yeah. The full link is in the book, but it also can be found on TikTok. I didn't put the link in here, but we could probably get that over to you so you can put it into your YouTube.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Chat. So the next part is before I move on to this next scene, that cold vapor cloud in front of it, what would that do to a craft over a long period of time, or an object, say a smaller remote controlled object, a small probe? That vapor cone would cool that object off if it was traveling for a long period of time through the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. There is a video called the rubber duck video where you see a large sphere with a smaller object above it as it's traveling around for 45 minutes. And everyone's been arguing over it. What is it? What is it? Theoretically, that smaller object could be a vapor cloud formed as it's traveling through the air at approximately 200 miles an hour. And that vapor cloud has cooled off the UAP itself, making it cold to the video, creating two separate, one small, one larger round object that the IR video camera is capturing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And people can look up the rubber duck video. I'll include a link to that too.
Okay. All right. So the next one is this is where my original MUFON Journal article ended and where the book takes off. So what I did here was I was curious, what would happen if you put a smaller warp nacelle inside a larger warp nacelle? So what is going on here is image 33 in the center shows 3 smaller warp nacelles inside of a disk. And my thinking was, would it cause an asymmetric shape or warping of the shape so that one side had a stronger warp field than the other side did? And the answer was yes. When I overlaid them in Excel, I took one grid, I put the smaller warp nacelle in it, and then I copied that grid into the next sheet, and I applied a larger warp nacelle upon it. And what you see here is in 32, the lower left-hand side has a larger shape deformation than the one on the right-hand side. So what this does is it causes this object in this configuration would not only go up, but it would also move slightly right towards image 33 in the middle. And so,
and just terminology point, a nacelle is like a locus or a center point of a warp engine?
No, if you think back on Star Trek, those 2 giant beams that are behind the Enterprise, those are warp nacelles. So a warp nacelle is the actual warp drive, the object that actually creates the spatial warp.
Fun. Does that word come from Star Trek, or does it have an origin in physics?
It's actually in the dictionary, and nacelle is defined as an energy source or drive. And who knows if it came from Star Trek, but it is actually in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Vocab moment.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so more importantly, image 34 on the right-hand side shows the same craft, but it's tilted. And so what I found was when you embed a smaller warp nacelle inside a larger warp nacelle, you can then create flight control capabilities. So by turning on 1 or 2, you can then tell it have the vehicle balance left or right, and you can have it move horizontally as well through the air. So in this particular case, image 34 shows what a disc-shaped object would look like as it's traveling perfectly horizontally along a path. It has to be tilted in its flight, just like a helicopter is tilted in its flight. And if you think, yep. And so this leads into the Paul Trent McMinnville photo, and one from 3 years later, the Rouen, France photo of a similar make and model.
Wow.
Now, 35 on the left shows the Paul Trent photo. I've overlaid that same spatial deformation grid on top of it. Now, I've actually centered the craft itself on the grid, and you can see above that there is a spire that sticks above the craft, and it's left of center, and it's tilted slightly. And then furthermore, you can see the right-hand side of the disc is bulging up and slightly larger, where the left-hand side, it is contracted and smaller in height. Oh. So that is gravitational spatial warping, gravitational lensing affecting how the craft itself looks.
Wow. There's your extra eye for detail coming through there.
Yep.
Never noticed that.
And so the reason why the spire is actually tilted to the left and is more to the left is because there's two spatial contractions happening above and near it. So that extra spatial contractions is causing that extra light bend, causing it to look farther left of center. And then the Rouen photo is the same basic shape and design. It's also got a spire above. You can see it's centered on the graph. It's also bent and set off center to the left. And you can also see that the craft is larger on the right-hand side than it is on the left-hand side. And there's a different bend. And below, on the bottom side, there's a larger dip on the bottom right than there is no dip on the left. So it's the same design taken 4 years later, 3 or 4 years later. The same gravitational lensing is affecting the way the craft appears.
Wow, this is fascinating. Just do you want to touch the spire a little bit and mention what you think that could do, or how it's surviving the gravitational field?
Yep, I'm getting there. Okay. That is actually part of the warp nacelle system.
Okay, great.
So going back here, you can see there's two red dots on either side of the craft and a red ring on the middle image around the disk. The original concept by Dr. Al-Kabir was, it's a ring-shaped device that creates the warp. Now, it's in here, it's a single warp nacelle, single ring, going around the exterior of the craft. And then I've got two smaller warp nacelles, each with their own little ring shown as red dots or blue dots. Red being the turned on, blue being turned off. Now, there was a paper released a few years ago by Dr. Harold White, and they were doing an experiment on, what is that effect again? I can't remember the name of it.
They're actually playing with individual single particles to see if they could accelerate them according to Alcubierre's formulas and make a warp of a single molecule, basically.
Interesting.
Well,
that's not what they wanted to do, but that's what they ended up doing.
That's very interesting. So this project was a molecular experiment, which ended up resulting in some warp discovery. Did I understand that right?
What Dr. Harold White was doing was he was working on experimenting on the Casimir effect. So this effect arises from the quantum theory of electromagnetic radiation, in which the energy present in empty space might produce a tiny force between two objects. The effect was first postulated in 1948 by Dutch physicist Hendrik Casimir. What he was trying to do, and you can see it in image 39 on the right, is he was creating this single sphere cylinder combination trying to produce the Casimir effect. He was experimenting with different shapes. What he discovered was left-hand side, image 37, is a close view of the world-line numerics energy density around a pillar. The right-hand side is actually the plotted energy density for an Alcubierre metric. So he accidentally created a micro warp bubble.
Oh, fun.
It was a discovery that nobody expected.
So doesn't that prove that Alcubierre was right? Warp drive is possible. We just don't have enough energy today, but it doesn't break the laws of physics.
Yep. It shows it was created, and it was created about 4 micrometers in size. That's smaller than a human hair kind of thing. And he did it with a 3D printed system. So in his paper, right-hand side image 39, he proposed to build a series of them in a row to try and daisy chain these warp nacelles together to see if he could produce a larger warp field. Now, the paper stops there. It does not go into whether or not he succeeded. And we don't know if he succeeded, because it's always possible that he may have succeeded. And if he did, because this was done for the Department of National Energy, or DARPA, it was done for DARPA, they would have immediately clamped down on it and classified it, and we would have never heard about it. And if he failed, he would have never told anyone he failed. So we don't know either way.
Is Dr. Harold White still operational? Is he still working in the scene?
I haven't looked him up to find out.
Okay, we'll check that out.
Okay, so this was an interesting, fascinating discovery. And the first thought was, wow, they got to increase this in size. But if it's using the Casimir effect, he will not be able to increase it in size. The only way to increase the warp bubble is through this daisy chain mechanism he was describing. So I took the Alcubierre formulas, and I'm trying to get it to go to the next page. Here we go. So I took the shape function and I plotted out left-hand side image number 40. What would the shape function look like if he had put 5 in a row? And you can see here, as more of them are turned on, the spatial warp does grow in size. However, the amplification, or the amount by which the warp bubble expands, decreases every time you add one. So it still grows in length, but it decreases in width. So it's kind of stretching it out. So that's a good thing. And the next step is I created a math formula where I created a cone as shown in number 41. What if you created a cone shape of multiple nacelles together? And what I found was that as you added more of them in across in this cone shape, the length or the width grew. And so the length was growing and the width was growing, which means if you turn off the outer ones, turn them on and off, that gives you throttle control.
So you're saying stacking them in this like pyramid shape allows you to expand both the length and the width, and then turning off the sides allows you to control throttle as in like speed, or control like direction?
As in speed. So it allows you to generate a localized gravitational field of the strength you want at the time you want it. So it's no longer on off. You now have full throttle control. You can just hover if you want. You can descend if you want. You can go up if you want. And you can go up very fast if you want. And so as I put this together, I realized that I had needed to update my graph. So this is the final graph of what a single warp nacelle system looks like inside a disc-shaped object. You're going to have one cone-shaped daisy chain warp nacelle down the center of the disc, and then you're going to have 3 smaller warp nacelles that are also small cones. I drew them as rectangles because in space you might need to reverse the direction. So you might turn your cone upside down by flipping in the direction of the ones you're turning on and off. But I use circles to represent that you can angle them for flight control directionality.
Got it. So you would maybe adjust where the rectangle is pointing to change thrust.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was the final configuration. I go into more detail in my book about other configurations. I place some towards the outside of the disk, and that is how the disk we saw departing really fast, it was basically having several horizontally set and turn them all on at the same time. So even these separate warp disk cells also work together to create a directional warp field that it used to depart horizontally at a very fast speed. So I guess this is where we could segment into CSSAA. There was some videos that had been, I found one on YouTube where somebody had pointed lasers at a UAP. And in a few of the frames, you can see the light bending momentarily behind the UAP. And our friend Rob Freeman has also been doing Skywatch, and they also captured a video with light bending behind a UAP as well. So
Interesting. Just want a side note, a gentleman named Alejandro Rojas, who works at Enigma Labs, when we spoke, just gave a PSA to people to please not wave laser pointers at things in the sky, because if they are airplanes, you could injure somebody or cause a dangerous situation. So, don't try this at home.
Exactly.
We explain how it can be done safely in the book.
Okay.
We are professionals, and we don't use the standard little tiny laser that everybody else does. We use professional ones, which I have locked up in a case behind my desk.
Nice. So would you generally agree with that advice? Like,
we always tell everybody when we do sky watching out in the field, we tell the first time we say, okay, we're going to hand you lasers. You're going to circle an object to bring it to our attention, never point it at the object.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was that circling of the object where we discovered the light bending as the light was passed on the other side of the object. So in this case, image 43 shows light on the other side of an object as the UAP passes in front. And you can see there will be some slight bending. There's another method that we recommend in the book where if you are able to point the laser using, say, a telescope or some kind of scope device, and if you can wave it through the lower spatial expansion below the UAP, it should, in theory, bend the light in one of two directions. It can bend down if it's passing through the lower part of the spatial curve, and it'll bend up if it's passing through the upper part of the spatial curve. If you do this, if it happens to be a helicopter with a spotlight, you're not going to blind the helicopter pilot because you're pointing the light above the spotlight where the pilot may be. Always keep it below, and that way it's safe for the occupants, whether they are human or non-human. And that's where the largest spatial curve is below the craft, and that you're going to have the higher likelihood of seeing your light bend. Now, the other thing you need to do is,
would you actually be able to see the laser bend like with your own eye?
Chad, do we have the photos from Brazil?
No, I do not. You never sent them.
They're in our book.
Yeah, wow. They're in the book.
So CISA was out in Brazil, and one of the Skywatcher participants was circling an object that was stationary. And before we even do things like that, we're listening to see if it's helicopters or the noise. There was absolutely nothing. And in her circling, she actually got really close to the bottom of it, not knowing it. And we captured it on video, and it clearly shows the light bending. And I sent that to Chad. That's why let's put this in the book.
Yeah, and it looks similar to image 43, where it's momentarily bending rather than being redirected. The light the light is passing through the spatial bend and coming towards the camera and making it look like the laser has bent. In this example, what we're asking professional skywatchers to do is try and get the light to point right through the lower spatial warp to see if it actually changes its trajectory. And then you also have to have your camera set up far away from the actual laser pointer, because if the camera operator is holding the laser pointer, he or she will not be able to see the light bend. So it has to be another person or persons at a distance, preferably 90 degrees is best, but 45 will do. And if you can get the light to change its trajectory as it passes through that lower spatial curve, that's evidence that it's using Alcubierre warp drive.
Oh, that's really cool. As a hypothesis that's testable in the field by anybody with basic equipment,
Exactly.
Great pointers. Thank you.
And
Exactly.
repeatable.
And
What we're
repeatable,
looking
yeah.
for. That's a true nature of doing scientific studies.
Yep. This is how to get that repeatable evidence. So I'm not saying that the images that you'll see in the book of those two laser pointers is evidence of UAP spatial warping. I'm saying this is how you go about proving it.
That's so great to know. It's so important for other teams doing backup work. And I know you mentioned elsewhere, I'm sure you've got other places to move on to, that you guys have done some extensive outreach to scientific peers and asked for review of your materials. Is that right?
Yeah. We did do for the MUFON journal. I can stop sharing now. That was the last slide.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So for the MUFON journl,
applause.
Oh, thank you. I actually asked Bob Spearing to send the article off for a proper peer review. He actually sent it to 5 scientists, and they came back with some suggestions and corrections, and I made adjustments to the journal based off of that. And due to size constraints, we chose just the Agua de la UAP. There was a couple others that I had in there as well. There was some where, for example, there was an Airbus 380 video of a cube traveling through the air, and there's some argument on that one. And I did see deformation of the background clouds, but the problem is clouds change themselves.
Yeah.
So it looks
less reliable than like the edge of a building.
Yeah, it's not as reliable as a landscape feature that is not possible to move. And so we excluded that one. But to Ryan's previous example of a cube surrounded by a clear sphere, it was a cube surrounded by a spatial warp that was bending light around, making it appear like it was inside a glass sphere.
Interesting.
That's why you hear the square UAP in a round body. It's not. It's the warp bubble, let's call it.
Interesting. Yeah. So it would be a visible bubble in some cases, then you're saying.
Yep.
It's a visible bubble, but instead of being glass, it's a spatial bend that's causing light to bend through it, just like it was if it was a glass lens.
Man, this is so fascinating. Do you have a natural next step that you'd like to take this conversation, or would you like to get peppered with questions here?
Yeah, why don't you start asking some questions? We do want to talk about our adventure that we've put together that Chad has now been asked to join, a group that we've been going for over 15 years to 22 countries and 65 cities.
Well, yeah, actually, there was a couple of things that Dave has been working on for the CSSAA, and it's to do with radar. So it has been said in radar as well as affected by gravitational lensing. And in the book Eminent by Luis Elizondo, he also describes time dilation being an effect. So in the case of radar, most people don't know this, but radar sends out a series of pulses, and each radar sends out a different series of pulses. And the reason being is if they send out the same pulses and there's 2 radar devices working, they can confuse each other. By using different pulses, they can recognize who sent out the signal, which device sent out that signal. However, with time dilation being affected by the expansion or contraction of the warp bubble, those pulses may lengthen or shorten, and when the radar receives them back, it won't recognize them, and it will think that the UAP is invisible to radar.
It doesn't know there's a UAP there.
Yeah.
So radar is a very defined frequency, and there's frequencies all over the world. Radars operate from as low as 200 megahertz all the way up to 15 gigahertz, which is well beyond any of our radio receivers and stuff that we could buy. I have a radio receiver that will run up to 6 gigahertz. So I'll give you a simple example, 1.111, to come up with a simple number, gigahertz is sent out, it expects 1.111. If it gets back 1.101, that's only 10 megahertz off, it doesn't recognize it. So spatial time warping can simply change that so easily. So I'm working on a method, because we do own a radar it's a marine radar. We just point it 45 degrees up into the air. I'm working on a way of seeing if I can look for those offsets in frequency. And I'm also working on a passive radar, which uses known frequencies that are coming from your local FM radio station. If they bounce off a airplane, we know it's an airplane because that same device I've built has a ABSD transponder antenna in it, so it knows it's an airplane, so it ignores it. But if it comes back with anything close to 98.1 as an example, it will tag it as being an unknown, and you'll show it on a display. So even passive radar, which doesn't send any signals out, can detect UAPs. That's a big project I'm working on. It's sitting on my desk, and I'm about halfway through it.
This is great. This is actually one of the main avenues I wanted to ask you about was sensor work and sensor development and how you feel the field is set up now. Do we need more equipment than we have? Do we need equipment breakthroughs to do some upcoming research? How do you feel?
Well, we do have a lot of equipment when CISA, as I call it, CSSAA, when the Center for the Scientific Study of Atmospheric Anomalies goes places, we're taking almost $200,000 to $250,000 worth of equipment with us. We have, for visible, we have everything from infrared, near infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, full spectrum cameras, and we do a lot of time lapse. We'll have a huge array of equipment set up on multiple tripods that we're shooting the videos or photographs. Along that, we have behind me a little black case. I call it the football, the little yellow keyboard on it. That has 5 computers in it. There are 3 software-defined radios built in there that will monitor the 3 different frequencies. So we always look for the water hole. The water hole is the only frequency in Earth that nobody's allowed to transmit on. It's basically 1.42 gigahertz to 1.67 gigahertz. And the water hole is where you send information or signals to outer space. That's SETI looking for returns. So basically, they're the only ones allowed to send on that frequency. Recently, I was out and I actually got a 1.161 gigahertz frequency. Totally it was like a digital signal. I could not decipher it. And being a computer engineer, I know, machine code and binary and hexadecimal and all that. It was totally undecipherable. Now,
and was that in the water hole?
That was in the water hole. And you're not supposed to send anything, so it wasn't coming from Earth, and I was picking up somebody's signal. The SETI is so far away. I was receiving it. So this same passive radar we're building also has a Kraken RF, and everybody knows that's in this business what a Kraken is. A Kraken is 5 software-defined radios in one package, and you use it to triangulate where the signal you're detecting is coming from. And you can basically put it on top of a vehicle, and you can actually tell which side of the vehicle this signal is coming from. So this is some of the equipment we're building. Also in that case is 2 little PCs, which do a number of other things, which I'm not going to disclose right now, because yes, we are working on new equipment that will help us gather data. And of course, all this data is recorded. The group has thousands and thousands of hours of data over the last 15 years and hundreds of UAP sightings. So we've asked Chad to join because the book and because Chad and I are good friends and he's got an incredible eye. I've been out on quite a few of the expeditions, but like I said, the whole group has been to 22 countries now, or 22 countries.
Wow.
For over 15 years. And I've seen multiple UAPs.
Interesting. And what sorry, before I ask you about the sightings, do you make any of this footage or data public in any way, in any automated way or in any formal way?
We did not for a while because Rob Freeman, who headed this up originally, was trying to make a video, a TV show called Making Contact. Rob Freeman, UFO World Explorer, and I was all part of that to help do that. And recently he came to me and said, Dave, I want you to take it over. And so I am now the president and CEO of CISA, and we're redefining and redoing a new directive. And we are actually going to publish a lot of these. We're going to put a website out. You'll be able to see them. We're going to publish some of the unbelievable finds that we have.
There was one that is published, the chief from Squamish.
Yes. You watch a lot of shows, you see a green orb going through trees. That is the chieftain, Squamish, BC orb that Rob called me up all in a almost like a panic. Dave, I'm sending you a video because I used to do all the video. I'm the forensic investigator. And I couldn't believe what I saw. It was a 3 to 5 foot orb. That's a large orb traveling about 35 kilometers an hour through the trees. And it definitely was an orb. And it also has a huge glow around it, which is a warp bubble. And it was shot, like I said, in Squamish, BC. And every show now has that on their shows because we let it free usage. So that was the Squamish orb. It also made the top UAP sightings in 2017 because it was not only investigated by me and not solved, but gave all the parameters it was. We also had to check by a number of other scientists that came back, said, wow, this is amazing. And everything I had published was correct. So.
The interesting thing about that one for me is that was 30 kilometers from where I grew up.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, fun.
You can go to Rob Freeman's UFO World Explorer YouTube channel. And you'll see a lot of things we did publish, but now we're doing it a new way, so it'll be more public. And the one that I really was excited about was called the Marisburg Vortex, and I'll let you watch it. Totally different.
I will make a note of the Marisburg Vortex.
Yeah, on the Rob Freeman UFO World Explorer channel. I'll give you a little hint. When you look at it, watch for something happening above what you're looking at, come into view, and leave.
Okay. So is the warp bubble pretty universal? Have you guys seen any UAP videos or collected any UAP data that did not have warping?
Gee, now that we know what we're looking for, because the last 15 years, we haven't Chad brought this to my attention. That's why we wrote the book.
Okay.
We're going back over a lot of the old videos we've taken now. I'm looking at tons of them to see if I can see warp bubbles. Now, you have to remember that if we're looking at something in outer space, because that's a lot of our footage, you're not going to see the warp bubble.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got videos of UAPs or flying saucers millions of miles away. Our equipment is that powerful. We can look way in to the Milky Way galaxy.
That's the tricky part about looking for this gravitational lensing is it needs to pass in front of something of a linear structure.
It has to be close.
It has to be close. Ideally, the ideal place would be set up on top of a mountain and look down, see if you can see anything passing below you. Airplanes, that's why the photos or the videos from airplanes work really well. That's why the Aguadilla video works really well, because with it being below, there's lots of stuff for it to create momentary deformations. When you're sitting down low and looking up in the night sky, you might get lucky if you see a star move as it passes in front of a star,
right?
Kind of thing. And like I said, there's lots of videos out there where people have filmed different UAP against the sky, and yeah, you can see the cloud move, but like I said, clouds move. So was the cloud moving because it was lensing, or was the cloud moving from the wind? So you can't look at that as definitive because it needs to be a non-moving linear structure.
Yeah.
I did not realize that you were doing astrophotography. That's news to me. You're recording some of these things millions of miles away.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say millions of miles, but
if you see some of the scopes and things that we have, there's a little black object sitting behind me. This is a military grade night vision. I can see in total 100% blacklist, and this has a scope on it that literally can look about 100 to 200 miles away.
Yeah, so
102. Okay.
1 to 200 miles is.
Yeah, but when you do an astrophotography, you're just looking up there, and if something, you see a star move, and all of a sudden the star starts doing zigzags.
Yeah.
And it starts coming down towards the Earth and gets bigger and bigger, then takes off. It might have been, a million miles away, but at warp speed, I'll use that term, and suddenly it's in our atmosphere. And we did have one up by Algonquin Park in Northern Ontario that went across the entire sky and left before you can snap your fingers. We're all looking there, and all of a sudden, zing. Now, you can't even photograph that thing. It's like 2 frames might have caught it. The speed it was going, uncalculatable, but millions of miles an hour, because you don't go from your entire horizon and your peripheral vision across and gone before you can even blink. And we all witnessed it.
You mentioned in the molecular experiment that you had some sense of how much energy that this would cost to do on a macro scale. Do you have a kind of ballpark of the kind of energy that we're talking about? I remember in Dr. Knuth's paper about the flight characteristics, estimating the flight characteristics of unmanned aerial vehicles. He's a friend of the show. We're big fans of his work. He mentions, I think, just one banking maneuver costing more energy than it takes to like run the United States, or than like all the nuclear power plants output in America. And that would just be for one moment of acceleration. Have you guys done some like back of the envelope calculations about what it would take to move across the sky millions of miles an hour, or even at like rubber ducky speed with a warp drive of some kind?
We haven't done that, Chad, because there's no mathematical formulas. There's nothing. It's beyond our capability today. We're talking 0-point energy modules, maybe. We're talking, unknown Pentium, element 117, Bob Lazar. And you notice Chad's little nacelles and stuff, and similar to Bob Lazar, what he said he saw.
Yeah,
and that's in the book. But anyways, we don't have the energy to do today. But keep in mind, these are not at the same technological level we are.
Yeah,
these crafts could be, I'm sorry, Chad, these crafts could be thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years ahead of us in evolution.
So what I was going to say was the reason why Dr. White was looking at the Casimir effect was it is a theoretical means by which to generate energy from nothing, essentially, taking advantage of energy built within space itself. Mm-hmm. And by the sounds of it, in theory, if he's right, if he did find that the Casimir effect creates a micro warp bubble, that energy that has to be generated is being generated from space, from the quantum level, from space itself. So that's where the energy is being pulled from. So to create that huge gravitational acceleration, you're just turning more and more of these micro warp bubbles on. And then to get the really, really fast dart that you see in that airplane video I showed, as well as what Dave just described, you would be turning on several macro warp nacelles within your craft to create a triangular or cone shape, and that would create the largest localized gravitational acceleration. So that, there's a lot of energy that's required, but by the sounds of it, theoretically, it's coming from the Casimir effect from quantum space itself.
Wow. So it's possible that we're harvesting this energy from the quantum structure of space rather than having some like extremely powerful nuclear drive.
Exactly.
That could bring up a whole new discussion about dark matter. We're not going to get into that one here today, but dark matter is energy.
Yeah.
So
and I did have this discussion with an astrophysicist, and Alcubierre says you need negative energy. That negative energy is dark energy.
Dark matter, dark energy, dark light, everything above.
So stuff we haven't been able to find yet, but that clearly exists.
They still haven't proven dark energy exists, except that dark light, which is produced by dark matter, has been found. And it was found by a Dr. Santilli in Florida, and he invented a telescope that can see it, and I have one.
You can see dark light with it.
You might take 100 hours of watching, and suddenly you will capture dark light.
What's it look like?
Just a flash of light, because it's obviously changing so you can see it. It's just, I have a video of a string of what we think is dark light, dark matter light.
Wow, that's fascinating. I thought we weren't even at a place where we knew that dark matter was real for sure.
Well, again, it's theoretical, and it makes sense because you got to balance the universe somehow. Mm-hmm. It's like in Star Trek, antimatter. What is antimatter? It's called dark matter. But the telescope, unfortunately, is so big. It weighs about 30, 40 pounds. You don't throw it on an airplane and go somewhere.
Sure.
We will set it up eventually at some place where we have clear, unbroken view of the sky and no light pollution. And that's our goal.
Well, to your point about goals, let's talk about next steps. Like, what kind of plans do you guys have in motion to get more data in the years ahead?
Well, that comes down to the group I keep calling, which is the Center for the Scientific Study of Atmospheric Anomalies. We're just going to call it, instead of CSSAA or CSSAA, we're going to call it CISA. Now,
nice. And you guys don't have a website yet, right? I've been having a hard time finding.
CSSAA.org is in production, and it'll probably be 6 months before we get something up, because it's going to have a lot of our videos. So we're going to be disclosing a lot of the things that we found. And we might go all the way back 15 years because there were some incredible sightings. Now, mind you, I've only been with Rob and his group for 10 years, which is the same time Chad and I met. And it all came about because I used to help run the Alien Cosmic Expo. I was one of the promoters of that and producers, and that's where I met Rob Freeman. And he brought in his first go at collecting data, and he'd been doing it for 5 years, and he had 5 or 6 cameras. Some of them like it's specialized. I have a camera that we took all the filters out of it, so it's full spectrum. It captures from infrared through visible light all the way to ultraviolet. You take all the filters out, and our modern day CMOS chips or CCD imagers inside don't have a narrow band. They're quite wide. That's why they have to put filters inside cameras, and people don't know there's actually a filter in there. A security camera has a IR filter, so when it flips to night, it removes the IR filter so you can see in the dark. So that's useful. So we are also experimenting using security cameras, because we have 16 and 32 megapixel security cameras. Your digital SLR, you might have an 18 megapixel camera like all the ones on my shelf, but they only shoot at 1 or 2 megapixels. The new ones shoot at what's called 4K, which is 2.24 megapixels. There's soon to be 8K, but they're also cinematography, but they are not anywhere close to 16 or 32 megapixels. There's a new security camera on the horizon. It'll be 64 megapixels and 105 megapixels. Nice. But people don't realize that you're shooting video with that. It's not a single image. You're not shooting photograph, because your 18 megapixel DSLR will take an 18 megapixel picture, but it can only shoot video 30 frames per second at maybe 1 megapixel. These security cameras shoot full video at 30 and 60 megapixels. So the images are incredible. And if you take the filters out, you now have full spectrum cameras shooting sometimes 60 frames per second. It's a lot of data, but it's amazing what you can see.
And you need a lens on those things that'll get you like, what, a mile out? I mean, UAP probably aren't close.
I can stick that night vision camera on our security cameras. Okay. I have a 15 megapixel security camera. I bolt onto the back of the dark matter telescope, so I don't have to look through it.
Interesting.
And I just watch a laptop.
So how far could you get a high resolution image? Like
if I were using this telescope, I could pull Saturn in, so it's 1/2 the size of the image. That's close. But if I'm using our standard DSLR stuff, I have a 300 millimeter lens that I put on the full frame or the full spectrum camera, and you're bringing in things from miles and miles and miles away. Literally, you can feel the frame. If you look at the sky, you're covering a vast amount of space in that frame, but you still do see incredible details.
And what about the challenge of the high speed? Like if some of these objects are zipping around from horizon to horizon, do you have some kind of automated way to track that, or are you stuck just moving it and hoping you get lucky?
We have two things. We do it manually. We have spotting scopes, so all the cameras are pointing to one specific spot, and if somebody points a laser and circles it, you quickly go over there. And we have this unit behind me. This is called the UFO DAP, made by Ron Olch in California. We have 2 of them. So this I modified from his original. Chad was impressed by this one, and I added a second camera to it. It's now a second camera. This camera is always pointing up. It detects movement. This is a PTZ 32 optical zoom mechanically, and then you can go digital zoom on top of that. This automatically zooms at what that thing is seeing and tracks it. And he's gone so far that he'll tell you if it's a bird or an airplane and you ignore it. And if it doesn't fit in one of 12 different scenarios, it videos it and tracks it right across the sky. This thing is amazing. I'm just modifying it to be higher, more resolution, more abilities. Now, you asked about sensors. We take gyroscopes, GPS, magnetometers, humidity sensors. Boy, the list is 12. I'm forgetting them all, but that is all data that we're recording. So if a UAP goes over, these things go like crazy, and we're recording all that data. So we got video, we've got sensor data, and that's what we need more people to be doing. There's a lot of movements out there where people are saying, let's get a whole bunch of sky cameras, all sky cameras, and let's network them together. So if you have one 10 miles down the road, another one even 20 miles down the road, you can triangulate that UAP sighting if they all see it. You'll know how high, which way it's going, and how far away it is. So
yeah. And all sky camera picks up, it's a 360 view of the whole sky, so no one has to point it. It just automatically captures it all in one big curved lens.
I have one on the back of my shed on a pole sticking way up, and it's been monitoring the skies for a long time. And it's 360, and the software will even tell you if something's going. It'll give you a light bar of all the light changes. So if you suddenly had a huge flash, it shows up in that graph, and it gives you star trails at the end, and it gives you time-lapse photography. So it's not shooting video. You couldn't build a computer big enough to store an all-sky camera shooting 30 frames per second, 24 hours a day, because after 10 days, you'd fill up, 100 terabytes. So it shoots one frame, whatever you want it. I got mine set up to do 4 frames per minute. I don't need to see, 15 frames per minute, not per second. I don't need to see movement. I need to capture it. And if it does capture something, it tells you. So, because that is still huge. That's 100 megabyte file. And then they'll give me time-lapse video, and I can watch 24 hours in 4 minutes.
Have you seen anything interesting doing that?
I haven't had a chance to check it lately.
Now, attention is the final resource that we have to bring to bear on this stuff.
But I know I have to check it tomorrow, because then I'll run out of space and they'll start overriding. So I've got quite a few to do. I'm glad it has the 4 or 5 minute time lapses so I can see things, and the other things, the star trails and other graphs. So I know if I detected something, I'll just delete the old files. I don't want to store terabytes and terabytes of data.
Sure. And as you say, we physically can't at the limit.
Right.
Yep. In that case, what we're looking for is if you have 2 or 3 set up and they both capture something high in the sky, doing you might be able to see the ISS fly over and curve back. But what if something's coming over and it changes direction, and it changes direction, and it changes direction? One could argue, well, it could have been a firefly in front of the camera. But if you have 2 cameras and they both capture it and they're both 100 miles apart, then you can calculate where that thing was. And oh my gosh, that thing was in outer space, captured and moving in different directions. What was that?
Yeah, I have a video of exactly what Chad's talking about. When we're at the Joshua Tree in the Mojave Desert in California, I captured a UAP that came screaming across the sky after standing still for 15 minutes. And what's exciting about that is we see another thing going up to it. We think, oh, that's just a satellite. And all of a sudden the first dot starts moving, and this one curves away really quickly to go the opposite direction. Like, oh, that's maybe an unfriendly UFO. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but it's what we're looking for. And it was way, way up in the sky.
Interesting. I guess it maybe is worth mentioning here, although we're not, as you said, going too far into speculation territory, that it's not impossible that some of these things are super advanced human tech. It does seem really unlikely that that could be an explanation for the entire phenomena stretching back into the 40s. But if we have been reverse engineering some of these craft, it is at least theoretically feasible that at this point in our 80-year project, we might have a couple of human-built warp objects up there. Total speculation.
I don't think we have got that. I think we've been reverse engineering things. If you look at the birth of fiber optics, I swear that it was reverse engineered from one of the UAPs, because that's how they control everything. They don't use cables of copper. I'm pretty sure that was reverse engineered, but we don't have the energy to create a warp drive. Anti-gravity propulsion is the nearest that we've come up with. And yes, there is a patent for it. And I can't speak any more about it because it was DARPA that did it, proved it, and then sold the patent.
They sold the patent?
Yeah. I will announce my U.S. counterpart, a partner of mine, bought it.
Oh, wow.
So I've seen it. We were supposed to build it, but unfortunately, and it was a $500 million investment. Unfortunately, the main engineer of this consortium of people we put together, which I was part of as one of the engineers, the main engineer passed away from COVID.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it went back to sitting on the shelf because my friend who was in charge of all this, he's still hurting from it. And he doesn't know what we're going to get back to doing this. But but that's not warp drive. And is it anti-gravity? I don't think there's any such thing. The patent shows that it is, what did you call it, Chad? Not anti-gravity, but localized gravity. And
generating a localized gravitational field.
Right. And that's what this thing's basically supposed to do. Now, DARPA spent apparently $500 million on building a prototype and then dropped it because they were told to drop it. And that's why they sold the patent off. My friend has connections, and he was actually sold it. And he said, we're going to develop it. And that's what they wanted him to do.
$500 million, huh? That's a project. I guess, speaking of money, what are you guys looking at in terms of CSSAA? Like how are you getting funding? Is this all out of pocket from participants, or are you looking? It's
all been personal money. No, it's all been personal money, but we're at the point now we don't want to do that anymore. We are looking for funds to go out and do the data capturing. We're looking at possibly buying a motorhome, putting a mobile lab in it with all this fantastic gear, going to sites that are known hotspots. I know Chad has one in Saskatchewan that we're dying to get out to. In fact, it's been put on our radar, Chad. I think you saw that. Rob said that's where we're going this summer. But it would be great to have a mobile lab because there's just too much equipment to truck now. I mean, we take 5 suitcases each when we go somewhere full of equipment. We can't do that anymore. And the airlines are getting so tough. And now, what if they confiscate it all? And Rob got to France to shoot stuff and found out they had sent his equipment from Toronto to Montreal and it was sitting unclaimed. And he's in France with 2 iPhones.
Oh, no.
He still got some incredible video, but all the equipment went to Montreal, not to France.
Well, because you mentioned RVs, I've got to mention the Tedesco brothers. Are you guys familiar with these gents, or have you spoken to them at all?
Via email, thanks to Chad. He opened up to them. We're going to send them our book, and I've been trying to get hold of them because during the New Jersey drone
incursion event, hoopla,
we reached out to them to meet up with them, but they unfortunately came back to me and said, we're tied up doing something. So we took the group and went down to Jersey Shores on the island and set up and watched for 4 nights.
Really? Did you see anything interesting down there?
We saw some interesting UAPs, but no drones. No drones. But we did see some UAPs fly across the sky at incredible speed.
Interesting. Like fast and changing direction.
Mach 12.
Yeah, that would be fast.
That's fast.
And that when you see, like, what are the qualifications or qualities that you're looking for to say, oh, this is a UAP?
Well, when you have something going Mach 12, it's a streak. Okay. Why? Well, people say it's a meteorite coming down. Yeah, except for one thing. I'm looking out and it went up. It came down and went up. Meteorites don't come down and go up.
So a direction change at high speed would be
at very high speed. And we saw one for sure, and unfortunately, it was just above our video capture. We were looking for drones over the city, and it was just above.
Oh, rough.
And that happens all the time.
Sure.
And of course, the radar, which was pointing at the right spot, went, oh, nothing. It was too fast to even detect it.
Right, because it gets between
signals.
The speed of the signals. Okay.
Yeah, what about that big thing is rotating at only a certain speed, eh?
Right. So what about public funding? Is it any easier to get public funding for this kind of science in Canada than it is in the US? There is no, as far as I know, public funding from the National Science Foundation in the United States yet. Although one of my guests that I spoke to said he thought NASA is now at the beginning of at least being open to the idea of funding projects like this.
Well, do you remember NASA did that panel with all those experts, and they all said that, we can't use military stuff because we can't divulge what it is. Well, it's not really some of the military stuff for UAP detection is not that much more than what we're doing. And I'm not going to talk about some of the stuff we've now done. But they all admitted that citizen science would be the best option. So if you're telling me they're going to fund it, that would be great. What do we have in Canada? Our Canadian government and our military won't even talk about UAPs.
Yeah, so we have a science group that is looking at it. Dave reached out to him. Crickets.
Yep.
So there is a science org that's publicly funded in Canada that is theoretically at least interested in this subject?
Well, it's called Sky Canada. They're supposed to put out a new report this spring. They did one last year, which was a joke. It was like the first Arrow or A-tip one that was 7 pages, and it was balloon, weather balloon, swamp gas. Oh, that one's unknown. And they only highlighted 7, dismissed 6 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Sky Canada was, I guess, a comment or the floor funded like it was demanded. They got the funding from ISED, I understand, or NRC, the National Research Council. They've been working on it for 2 years. As the head of MUFON at the time, I reached out and said, "You're looking for cases, you're looking for information. We'll be very glad to help you." No response whatsoever. And I've sent more things now to tell them we're going to do what we're going to do with CISA. No response so far. We need somebody from the floor. We need an MPP to act on our behalf. Unfortunately, Mr. McTeague he was our champion. He is not running in the new election. Dan McTeague. So we've lost another person. Sorry?
He's retiring.
He's retiring. So we've lost our person who was trying to help us. You know of anybody, or where we can get funding, let us know, because this is big dollar value stuff. I mean, if you're going to buy $500,000 worth of equipment, and then you got to fund it to go places, this is big bucks.
Yeah, it's gradually revealed itself to me as the major stumbling block going forward. I would think there's plenty of interest now, and I think as you pointed out, we have really good sensor equipment that can help us get good information. We do need more money just to get these sensors in more places and to pay for people's time to go, drive around in an RV looking at the sky.
Or fly somewhere.
And what, sorry?
Or to fly somewhere, but I would like to kind of keep it more to North America, because North America is now getting more and more sightings. The hot spot in the world is Brazil. I'll tell you that right now, Brazil. But it's harder to get in Brazil now. They just enacted the visa requirements policy. And that takes months to get. So you can't suddenly have something happening and hop in a plane and go.
Well, so luckily you've got this hot spot near Saskatchewan, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, Saskatchewan's interesting. It's a very sparsely populated. I think there's 1.3 million people inside of a space the size of California. It's even bigger.
Wow.
And so there's very little light pollution here. There's only there's only 3 major towns. The biggest one, Saskatoon's 250,000 people.
Okay.
You get outside of these towns, you can see the northern lights like you wouldn't believe. It's perfect for sky watching events, and there are a large number of people. They're spread out, but because of the number of people spread out across all these farms, because the lower third of the province is just all farmland, so there's sparsely populated all throughout there, and they're seeing things when they go out and take a smoke or walk their dog. So there's been a number of interesting sightings, including a very large number of large triangles.
Really? And you have not yet had the privilege of experiencing one of these triangles, is that right? Either of you guys?
I've had 2 sightings of triangles myself.
Oh my good Lord. Excuse me. Wow.
Yeah,
what was that like?
One was in BC.
British Columbia?
British Columbia. So there was a family gathering at my house, and I saw this V-shaped row of lights out the window, and I'm like, what is that? And everyone came to the window, and we're staring at this thing, and this V shape of lights comes in towards us. And my house was on a rocky outcrop on the side of a mountain.
Nice.
And it dipped down and went below the line of sight, and we could see down upon it as it passed. And it kind of got lit up by the town lights just slightly, so you could see there was some kind of wing formation. And my uncle, who's a pilot, a private pilot, says, well, there you go, it must be an airplane. Well, this is on the side of a mountain, on the opposite side of the mountains from Vancouver. There should be no aircraft flying there. I've talked to pilots. You do not want to fly near a mountain. You do not want to buzz mountainside villages in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The only way it could have been a man-made aircraft was if it was actively falling to the ground and crashing. But it didn't crash. It leveled out and it flew off and disappeared. And the thing, I superimposed it on a photo of that same angle of view that my dad had, and it was massively large, very large. It was like the size of a school. And then I had a sighting when I was in Mexico City, actually. In case anyone had seen it, it was January 31st, 2020, just before the outbreak. I had been down there on a trip, and I was on a shuttle, then taking the shuttle back to the airport. It was like 3 a.m. Our flight was like 6 a.m. or something like that. I'm just looking out the window and enjoying the view. And Mexico City is enormous. There's 32 million people in a city. And so you look out and you see just the sea of yellow lights from the street lights and the houses. And there's these large geographic features of parks, or these hills that are too steep to build on. And you see these dark masses in among the sea of lights. And I realized one of these masses was moving. And it came up to a building, and it flipped up over and turned around in all of less than a second. And it revealed itself to be this huge triangular craft. It was 3 or 4 blocks wide. It was massively large. And then I was about to call it out to everyone else on the shuttle, and then all of a sudden all these buildings came between us and the thing, because the highway we were on was on a hillside, and we were able to look down, but all of a sudden all these skyscrapers suddenly blocked the view. And we turned a corner and there was no way to look back. So I was the only one there to see it. But, if anyone in Mexico City saw something that night, definitely reach out.
Was it New Year's Eve?
Yeah, 31st. January 31st. So
January 31st, not December. Right. Sorry. Okay, so let's wish cast a little bit. Let's just imagine this next 5 years go as well as we could possibly hope. What would you guys like to see happen?
I can tell you about that, but just before we do that, I'm going to show you something.
While he's looking that up, my wish is the book was peer reviewed by a couple of PhDs, double blind. So I don't know who they were. They don't know who I was, but they did review it. It didn't include the IR balloon parts. It was more of a written as a science paper, but they reviewed it. They said, there was a bunch of number of little things, typos, minor adjustments here, ask for clarifications there, but it's a peer reviewed book. It did not get published as a science paper because, as Dr. Villaroo pointed out numerous times, it's really hard to get UFO related stuff published.
Yeah,
I would like to see my paper in the form of the book reviewed by other scientists and have them look at it. I'm not saying that what I found is going to be remanufacturable next week. We still have some hurdles to find, but there's 4 main stages you need to make this thing plausible. Identified first by Al-Kabir, what's the general math? And then Dr. White found, yes, they are real. I made micro warp bubbles. And then I've basically created the flight control methodology for it. And then someone has to actually manufacture the micro warp bubbles into a larger set that can be then used. So I think we're well on our way to getting there. But basically, I just wanted to get the word out that the math is now in this peer-reviewed book, And it says that what we'd seen in those UFO videos and those UFO photos way back when was all predicted by the Alcubierre photo.
Mm-hmm. I will throw up a picture if you want to see something unique. We talk about triangles and cones. Tell me when you see this interesting.
Yes. What am I looking at?
You are looking, it's really dark, isn't it?
Oh, I can see it. It looks like a clear picture.
You are looking at a UFO, a UP, back in the day, in the 50s, that was caught in Maniwaki, Quebec, little town in northern Quebec. Everybody goes, oh, this is a fake. Well, I was handed the actual Kodak slide of this object.
Cool.
You can't fake a Kodak slide when somebody says, here's the picture. And I had to work on this to figure out what it is. Now, we talk about warp drives. What are all these little round bubble things?
Yeah.
And this was written up in a paper back in the 50s, and everybody said it's a hoax, it's a hoax. Yeah, and it turned out to be the size of a Cessna airplane. Think of a two-door Cessna airplane. So it wasn't that small. And it has bubbles on the top, bubbles around the base, and it's typically, a cone shape, but it has the center section, the curved, like flying saucer at the bottom. This, like I said, was, I had, as the national director, I was approached by somebody who was going through his father's belongings. He was the mayor of that town, and he was given it to decide what it was and to give it and help the local newspaper write up the story. And he kept the slide.
Cool.
And everybody knew about this until my friend found it in his dad's belongings. So he brought it to me immediately, and I held the slide in my hand. It was like unbelievable. So it's for real. But, I need Chad to say, what the hell is this?
Yeah, it's very unusual looking. It's kind of like a jester cap or something, but with balls at the bottom sides and on the top tip.
So, Chad, you've never seen this. This is the Maniwaki UAP or UFO back in the day. It was caught in the 50s sometime in Maniwaki, Quebec, and the owner of the little town. Everybody says, oh, this is a fabrication. It's not, because I was given the Kodak slide that took this picture.
Okay.
So you don't fake a Kodak slide.
No.
And there was a whole bunch of slides handed to me, Caleb, like the befores, the whole after. There's 3 or 4 shots of this far away. As it came in close, they got it. But you don't fake, this many shots, because it was over a lake. You can't hang things over a lake. You can't throw something in the air and shoot it for, click, 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 click. It's not going to stay there. So it was a real thing. Now, Chad, what are these bubbles? It has a flying saucer base and a cone. The cone is almost like it's covering the cell in the middle.
Yeah.
Are these propulsion direction things?
I look at this, and the first thing that comes to mind is it'll sound off topic for a sec, but Ukraine has built a drone that is a mothership drone. It flies around and it drops off smaller drones that go off.
Heard about it.
I look at this and I see the same thing. I see a cone-shaped UAP, and so the cone shape works well for extreme gravitational acceleration. Then the spheres around the outside may very well be those 3 to 4 foot diameter drones that we see a lot of, like the ones in the Aguadilla UAP. And it could be a carrier for smaller drones.
So there you go. This was captured and determined to be the size of a small 2-seater Cessna aircraft. So it wasn't small.
That sounds about right, because that means those spheres are the same size as the Aguadilla UAP video.
You got it. Yep. That's why I wanted to show you this. Now, you talk about where's the next direction. I am going through hundreds of cases that I have because of my position and the videos that Rob has been storing. And we want to start bringing this back to the forefront and have science look at it. Now that we've discovered the warp bubbles and the clouds, the forming vapor clouds, vapor cones. Oh, it's been a long day. I want to look through all this, and of course I want to get out there and find more of what we're doing now and really progress the science. That's where we're going. You asked everybody if they've seen triangles. Chad answered you, yes, but I can't discuss it. So the one thing you have to understand, I've been very careful tonight. I have Canadian security clearances and I have NATO secret clearance. I have NDAs. I cannot talk about certain things. That says it all. So I'm going to say, when it comes to a triangle, I can neither confirm nor deny that statement. Okay?
Very diplomatic. Roger, loud and clear.
Oh,
You got it?
well, going back to the triangles, one person reported here in Saskatoon, and it's in my other book, Missing Time 2, and it's also mentioned in this book in one section, and it's also in the preview for the next book. A friend of mine, there was a multiple witness sighting. About 3 or 4 people saw it, but it was the only daylight sighting of a triangle. And I walked over I met my friend at his parents' house where this event happened. And I asked him, how big was this thing at arm's length? And you do that to as a measurement. So you hold the thing out, the moon is the size of the quarter at arm's length, right? I was expecting to say maybe, 6 inches, a foot. And he says 15 feet. And he's like, no, that's not right. You don't understand. I couldn't see the edges of the craft on either side because the houses were blocking it. Wow. And so I recreated it in 3D. I took a 360 photo of the cul-de-sac. When it disappeared over the horizon, he reached out full arm's length to show how wide it was as it disappeared on the horizon, but it happened right at sunrise. And he said he had his back to it. His girlfriend said, what the hell is that? And he said, it was like this curtain came down over the neighborhood. And he looked up and all he saw was this gunmetal gray covering the entire neighborhood. And there was structure to the back of it, some kind of beam sticking out. And he says it was definitely not aerodynamic. And a neighbor also had seen it a couple of blocks over, and that person had reported to another Saskatoon ufologist independently of mine. We compared notes and later, and we found, I was telling her about this. She goes, "Oh, so-and-so reported this to me as well back then." And I calculated it was the size of your average mall. Not quite the size of the Mall of America, but pretty close. And so, it was the only daylight sighting that I know about.
And we can't wait for his book to come out so you can read about all this. I've read about it because I read the book already.
I sent Dave my original render of it, and he says, "What, you mean that cloud?" I said, "That's no cloud."
Yeah. It was the whole thing blocking everything. Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to say, unless you really have some more questions, I think Canada should take the lead and start disclosure. We can't rely on the U.S. to do it anymore. They're no longer our friend. I don't want to get into politics, but they've shown that. So Canada, wise up. And in the book, we have written an open letter. And you need to get the book to read what that letter states. And I think we should take the lead and disclose. Capital E, disclosure.
I made a really good argument why it's in Canada's best interests to make the disclosure ourselves.
Cool. Great idea. And that's a wonderful place to land. So everybody check out this book, head over to Amazon and look for Hidden in Plain Sight, Evidence of Exotic UFO Propulsion. Dave and Chad, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the detail. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through it. Is there a place where you like people to reach out to you online, or are you not on the digital services these days?
I have a website with a contact form. It's true-experiences.ca.
Okay.
So there is a contact form there. So
true-experiences.ca.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And Dave, is there any place where you like people to reach out to you?
No, we're using the same one.
Great.
They might have questions that I can answer, and Chad will answer the majority of them. But no, we've just decided to use the one until we get more social media and stuff up and running with CISA.
And do you have like an X feed for CISA or any other kind of social?
Nothing on our side yet. It's all coming.
All right. Well, we'll keep
I do have an X feed. It's C Wanless author. So CWANLESS author.
Okay, great.
The American
Looks like
spelling.
you've got, what was that, Dave? Sorry.
I think that's the American spelling you use, isn't it?
AUTHOR.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. All right, cool. Well, I'll put that in the description, and we'll keep our eyes out for CSSAA. It looks like you guys have some competition from the Coquidian Secondary Schools Athletic Association and maybe a group of anesthesiologists. So we'll keep our eyes out for the evolving acronym.
Oh, we have the domain name, so we already have it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's already registered. CISA.org.
Well, we're going to follow your work with great interest. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. And Godspeed, you guys. Per aspera ad astra.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you. And that's the show. Thank you for watching or listening. If you'd like to subscribe to the show, you can do that on patreon.com/WTUFO or on YouTube or on Buzzsprout. You can support us for as much or as little per month as you would like to. We really appreciate anything that you can contribute. Also, you can check out Spacefair's shop at spacefair.etsy.com. Thank you again for watching or listening. I hope you have a beautiful day.